What if you could feel freedom by taking a new career path today? Welcome to this Designing Your Legacy podcast episode with Marty Greenbaum. He grew up in a family franchise business known as PostNet. They were a competitor to FedEx and UPS, and today he's branched out to start his own franchising consultant business. He's worked with 120 brands, many of which are household names, and he joins us today to speak into how franchising can help you design your legacy. Welcome, Marty.
Angelina, thank you. I'm so happy to be on your show today. Thank you.
Yes, well, I think the topic of franchising is fascinating. Many people don't know about it. In our preamble, I chatted with you that I learned about franchising in my prior career as a commercial real estate broker, but many people don't know. So maybe we should start out with what is franchising and what brought you here?
Well, franchising is very interesting because in essence, people have developed a business, usually entrepreneurs, and over time that business is thriving. And, you could look at some of the big brands. Most people, when they think of franchising, they think of McDonald's or Subway, these big success stories. But the fact is there's 3,500 franchises in the US, and it grows by about 300 new franchises a year. So franchising is very hot right now. And why is it hot? Because it allows people to get into business and mitigate much of the risk of going into business. See, many people, when they get into business, they have to do everything, think of everything. And if you haven't been in that business, it's very hard to do. And that's why there's a high failure rate in franchising, or not in franchising, in independent business. Excuse me. But in franchising, it's quite the opposite because you have a proven model. You have a proven brand with equity. And there's so much support and training. You don't have to be an expert in a specific business or even know about it, because most people, they come to the table, if you've been working in corporate America for most of your life, you're going to come to the table with management skills, certain degree of sales skills or communication skills. Now the question is, what's going to be the right franchise for you? So franchising is great. I love this industry. I've been in it for 30 years. And as you mentioned, my family started PostNet, which
yes, I just wanted to interrupt for a second. So before we get into the problems that franchising solves, yes, you come from a background where the patriarchs in your family, they knew shipping and they knew printing. Would you speak into this?
Well, years ago, when I was actually in college, my father and a partner started the predecessor to PostNet. So we were developing independent mail centers back in the 80s. And my brother, I had three older brothers in the business with me. And one of my brothers, Steve Greenbaum, he said, hey, we need to turn this into a franchise. We need to grow this differently. And that's what we did. So what started out as selling independent businesses, helping people into business, became a global franchise with over 600 locations globally. And it was quite the journey. I helped in my younger days. I helped people get into business. I worked with hundreds of people, helping them get into business. That business has evolved over the years, and but many people have found that to be a great convenience in their communities. So it served a purpose, right?
Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned also is that many times individuals can find themselves in their 50s and they might not have job security with corporate America. And so you made a joke, I think in one of your prior podcasts, that franchising could be your retirement job. Would you elaborate?
Well, listen, so much is changing. I mean, you hear about all these layoffs. I'm 59 years old. The thought of ever having to go get a job for someone in their 50s is scary. The longevity isn't there anymore. The security, the pensions, the things that we grew up with are no longer there. So I talk to hundreds of people every month regarding, hey, where are you at? What are your concerns? What is that path? Where is that path taking you? And many are leaving corporate America and looking for options because they're not ready to retire. they still, in their mid-50s, they still have a lot of runway left and they want to create something meaningful. So franchising offers that.
Yes, absolutely. And I also wanted to add that these days, individuals who are thinking about their legacy, their holistic legacy plans, aren't just in their 60s and their 70s. They're now in their 40s and 50s because of what you're speaking into. The economy is changing. The landscape is different. We have to read the baseline differently, whether it's for our own retirement or what we can set up for future generations, the next generations, and so forth. So one of the things you mentioned in your prior podcast is that I'm just going to quote it as like franchising could be a viable option to leave a lasting legacy. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is you almost get to buy your way into a network compared to being that sole entrepreneur out there. And maybe it's because that franchise company receives royalties, but would you speak into this, that it's that network, it's that support, that backup, that somebody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel or think of it all on their own?
Right. So if you were to open up an independent automotive shop, maybe you don't have experience, but you always like cars, right? Well, most people don't know how to go about that. But let's take a brand like Midas or Meineke, right? You get into this proven franchise system. Once you open your doors, guess what? You're going to have customers and they're going to have confidence in your brand. Okay. But also, these organizations, and I call them legacy brands.
Yeah, I might even call that brand equity. Keep going.
Right, exactly, brand equity. So you get that brand equity, you have a legacy brand, but it's even more than that. It's all the training, the support, the ongoing support, all the systems. So when you buy into a franchise, and really you can't buy a franchise, they have to be awarded. They have to accept you into their family. But when you buy into into a franchise family, not only are you getting a proven system with proven financial performance, brand equity, great technology, often incredible marketing and marketing partnerships, and all the things that you need to boost success. Okay, those are all important, and you also get like other franchisees. So think about it. You're in this franchise family, you go to an annual conference, you meet 20 other people that own the same franchise as you, and then you're starting to build relationships and understanding best practices. How valuable is that? All right. So franchising offers a lot, but one of the biggest things that it offers, and I'll tell you, most people don't think about this. If I had 200, 300, 500 franchises and the franchisor shares like the KPIs, the metrics. So let's say my business wasn't doing as well, and I'm not sure how to pinpoint that.
Yes,
as an independent,
I just have to shoot for a sec. KPIs, key performance indicators. Keep going.
Right. Yes. So as a business owner of an independent business, I may not understand, should my labor costs be 26% or 22%? Am I missing the boat here on the average ticket, or what are the areas that I need to fix? But if you have a franchise and most of them do share those KPIs, then you could match your business up against that, especially against the top performers, and say, where do I need to take these numbers and how do I fix the problem? Right. So that benefit is huge in addition to having other franchisees to, share best practices with.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I think that you bring value to the conversation around legacy. So before I make the joke about matchmaker,
Right.
you get to talk to individuals that might be looking for new opportunities as they grow their wealth, and they can allocate it into buying into this opportunity, or that find themselves at that life transition that you spoke about before, whether it's within corporate America or just a change in careers, or they find themselves being laid off and so forth, because, there's not the promises today like there was maybe a generation or two ago. And I just wanted to bring up that I think that the value that you bring is, if somebody doesn't know anything about this conversation, they can come to you and have that introductory session or two or more, and you can match them with a franchise that is, one out of those 3,500. Would you talk about that a little bit?
You couldn't ask me a better question. Thank you. But really, first of all, let me just start with, listen, People look into franchising for a number of key reasons, okay? Sometimes it's they're unhappy with their job, right? And they just are tired of making other people money, okay? Sometimes it's because they always aspired to be more, and they look at where they're at with their retirement, and they say, you know what? Doing what I'm doing is not going to get me there. I get some people that, reach out to me because they have children in their 20s and they went to college, but they still need direction. They still need to help them get started somewhere. And they view franchising as a way to do it. There's other people like big investor individuals, high net worth guys and women that are looking to create another asset that could really perform extremely well. And what franchising offers is that ability to do that and have a proven system with proven performance. In regards to what I do, the thing is that most people looking into franchising have never done it before. There's just so much to know, so much to consider. You could look online and see all these different brands, and most people would gravitate to something that they've had some type of experience or somebody told them about, or some friend of theirs did really well because he had massage studios, or some guy did really great, owning 14 Meineke car care centers, or whatever that may look like. But most people, they don't know what franchise is going to be right for them. And what they do is they go online and they start contacting franchises. And guess what happens? They get 1 million sales calls. Okay. Now, I do it differently. I have a process that I've developed, very easy process. First of all, I get to know them. If I'm going to match somebody to a franchise, I want to learn about them. So we have a great conversation. I learn about some of their history, where their skills and abilities, what goals they have, what type of lifestyle they want to create, right? Then we brainstorm over franchising, and I really open their eyes up to the world of franchising. I walk them through the different categories of franchising. And most of the people said, geez, I didn't even know these things existed. And then that's when they get excited. And then ultimately, through this process, I'm going to bring them my recommendations. So this process usually is a week or two process, usually 2 weeks. And I get them to the point where they don't have to blindly pick all kinds of franchises that they don't know if they're good companies, they don't know their performance, they don't know if they're the right fit. I try to make it easier, and I do. And then I'm there to support them through the process. So that's kind of how I work.
Well, I think what you're speaking into is if somebody can have a guide through that process, they're not just throwing themselves in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and trying to just figure it out. It's leaning into the experience of somebody who is seasoned, because like you had mentioned before, they might have no experience, or they might be looking to diversify their income portfolio. And, especially in today's world where, cryptocurrency is great one day and the next day that company isn't there anymore. And so I think it's that ability to look into what is available, but also to have a guide that can help them through all that data so they're not overwhelmed.
Right. And you know what? In this process, most people don't understand what the right due diligence, what do they need to know? What do they ask? And this process, not only do you speak with the franchisor, you're going to end up, you're going to end up speaking to franchisees. Okay. Which is so important. What if you were interested in a franchise and you had the ability to, speak with 5 or 10 existing franchisees? Now, franchisors kind of want you to do that. But I always suggest to my clients, let's find some franchisees that they didn't suggest. And let's, make sure we get those in the mix. Let's get you to a location and maybe visit a location, or even work in the, ask the owner, can I hang out for the day? And here's the other thing that I think people forget to do in this process is the customers. So everything is all about reviews and customer satisfaction. So how do you gauge the reputation of a good franchise? Well, take a look at their reviews, see what people are saying, see what they like about them, right? I would even, if I was buying a franchise, I would go there and actually try to strike up a conversation with the customer. Hey, how often do you come? What do you love about our brand? What do you? So these are the things that are all part of the right due diligence. But again, never doing it before is creates that issue like, you're not going to have the right information before you make a decision. And that's where I try to educate people.
Yes, that's lovely. Would you speak into some of the numbers for a moment? Like, is it about 50,000 to get started, 100,000? Kind of, where is that range? So if somebody's listening, and whether they're a millennial, Gen X, a baby boomer, kind of where is the entry?
Well, the entry is like at 10,000, and you could spend over $1 million on a franchise. So there's different entry levels depending on what you want to do and what you could afford and what makes sense for you. Okay. So for younger people, I will tell you this, let's distinguish a little bit between service businesses and retail businesses, right? So if you opened a store, then you would have to build out that store, and you would have to have more employees, and there's going to be a lot of hours, and there's going to be a big investment because you're going to have contractors building out the store. You got to buy a sign. You're going to have, equipment.
Tenant improvements.
Right, tenant improvements, exactly. On the flip side, you open up a service company, and there's so many services, and there's some really neat, innovative ones. But if we take a standard service, like maid services, right? Molly Maid is a great brand, part of Neighborly. You take Molly Maid, and that investment level may only be $120,000. You may have to buy some vehicles. And by the way, we could get into the discussion how people finance it too. But what I'm saying is service businesses, usually $100,000 to $200,000, easier to get into. You could scale as you grow the business. So a lot of people that, aren't at that point, don't have big money, they'll find service businesses that are good sense. And I'll tell you something, just because you don't have brick and mortar, you don't have a location, doesn't mean that service business can't generate as much or more, okay? Because I've seen some people take these service businesses and grow their territories and have $2 million, $4 million businesses. HVAC is a great example of that. The investment of an HVAC company, maybe 150, 200, but they become big right now, especially. Everybody needs their AC fixed, it seems like. So those are some ideas.
Wanted to highlight for a moment, you had mentioned, and the morning sunlight is streaming in right now on me. You had mentioned that there's 3 industries right now that are particularly in demand. So if somebody has the wheels turning in their mind, and they're thinking about possibilities that are realistic in today's marketplace so that they can make that risk and take that investment. You had mentioned the senior industry, that construction industry, whether it's the HVAC or roofing and so forth, but also I think you mentioned the medical industry, whether it's mental health or physical health.
Right.
Would you speak into those 3 trends that you're seeing?
Well, first of all, the health industry, I'll start with. The health industry is a great industry. Much of it is insurance-based, right? And guess what? It's never going away. So people need various services, and there's everything from urgent care to physical therapy to mental health. Now, the mental health thing you brought up, you don't have to be a therapist to own a mental health franchise. You hire a matter of fact, this is a very innovative model because it's very semi-absentee. You don't hardly have to be there. You hire a therapist, and that therapist hires therapists, lead therapists, and then they hire therapists under the lead therapist. You handle marketing and financial management, but basically very interesting, fast-growing business model. But physical therapy is another one, and they have a balance in physical. It's a great franchise, but there's so many different innovative brands in that healthcare space, and it's a hot area. The construction and anything what I call home services industry is very recession-proof. And right now, a lot of people are worried, like, okay, if something happens to the economy, what type of business can I have that's going to weather the economy, right? So, service businesses, and even right now with the landscape in real estate, people are still fixing up their homes. They may not be buying as much new homes, but guess what? Their pipes are breaking. They may have a leak in the roof. They may have, finally decided to get that new carpeting they wanted. And so instead of investing in new homes, they're saying, how do we make our home a little bit nicer, right? And then senior care, what a great industry. And I'll tell you something, I think it's every day, 10,000 people turn the age of 65, and it could be more. But I mean, it's massive. Right now, the baby boomers are really becoming that big market that's hitting that age where they're going to need help. They're going to need services. In the senior care space, there's a lot of great companies, and there's different types of senior care. There's that in-home care, right? There's skilled nursing care. There's senior facilities, helping people find that perfect fit senior facility. It's kind of like senior facility matchmaking. And there's even accessibility, where that whole wheelchair, chair lifts, walk-in tubs, that's a huge business right now. So yeah, there's a lot of great industries. And what's important, I think, as you look at franchise opportunities moving forward, is what is the right fit for your local area, and what's going to be recession proof, and then what has really strong financial performance, right?
Yes, absolutely. Are there any particular success stories that you can think of, maybe from top of mind, of somebody that came to you and they didn't know anything, or they knew a little bit, and you were able to walk them through the process?
Well, listen, several years ago, I worked with a gentleman. There's a IT franchise called Team Logic IT, okay? Team Logic is 200 offices strong. They provide IT services, outsource IT to small, medium-sized businesses. 80% of small, medium-sized businesses outsource their IT. They don't want to have that expense of having an IT expert on staff. And I'm talking about like medical groups, like cardiology groups with 3-4 offices, or big media companies, or distribution centers. So these small businesses are looking for IT. Now, I helped a gentleman into that business, and at his first year, he was awarded the top new franchisee of the year. And now he's got 3 markets. He's expanded to 3 markets, and he's doing fantastically. Okay. So it's about, and he had some degree of knowledge of IT, but he also had strong sales and networking skills. So he was like custom fit for Team Logic, and he's thrilled. He's doing great. But there's so many great stories out there.
That's lovely. And I just want to highlight again that we oftentimes read stories in the Wall Street Journal about corporate politics. And like you had mentioned before, sometimes people don't want to work for a boss anymore, but they don't know the options that are available, or who is out there in the sea of consultants that has the expertise to help them. But also, I mean, we see the statistics about even bullying in corporate America. And
Oh, yeah.
it's like something like 50%. It's much higher than we realize. And so if somebody can find the courage to have that initial conversation and explore what is available to them, they can find a whole world, like you had said, that is available to them, where they can open up their own with a team of people, have that network support behind them. And it's a win-win, because that franchise company, they get those royalties, whether it's 8% or 7% or whatever those numbers are. And then they can grow their own business out there in the field, whether it's the territories. And like you said, they don't necessarily have to have the expertise. That's a part of being that business owner. They get to hire people and maybe finally be that fair boss in terms of power.
Well, you touched on something that you said I want to talk on. Let's talk about fear a little bit, okay? Listen, making changes, big changes in one's life is scary, okay? This is a big issue that I help my clients through, because if they've been in a certain corporate job for years, okay, and they've never ventured out, they've always wanted to, but what kept them was fear or lack of knowledge, perhaps. So it's so important. When I work with clients, I say to them, listen, right now you're learning. You're learning. We're going to see if franchising is a good fit for you, and we're going to identify certain franchises that could be a good fit, but you're learning, okay? When you get scared, the 2 weeks before you're going to sign a franchise agreement, and then you're really going to get scared. But right now, get excited, because here you are, and we touched on that, going down a certain path in your life, right? It's not taking you where you really need to go. You're making other people money. You're not on that right path. You're not building a legacy the way you feel you could build it. So it takes courage to get off that path and to find a new path. Okay. But just know that, hey, you get educated, explore it, learn it, have the help of someone who knows how to educate you and will make sure that you understand what boxes need to be checked. Okay. And then when you're making a decision, you're going to be making a smarter decision. And that decision could be to move forward, or it could be to not move forward. That's, but that's how I see it. And that's what I help my clients through. And that's what's important.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for speaking into that, because people never know the transition that they can find themselves in. And that transition can be one of, oh my goodness, I'm in a family business, but I just got wiped out. And we're not going to make it to the second or the third or the fourth generation. Or the alternative, they could say to themselves, I've been at this company for X number of years, and oh my goodness, they've just laid off 50,000 people. And I've only known a lifestyle of receiving a paycheck on the 1st and the 15th, or whatever the arrangement is. And now all of a sudden they have an enormous amount of talent and experience, but how do they parlay that into the next venture without, thinking that they had to do what they did yesterday?
Exactly. Yeah. And when people get there, that's when they start getting excited. But you still have to roll up your sleeves and know that when you get into business, whether it's a franchise or any other business, you have to be relentless. You have to have a great work ethic, and you have to also work smart. Okay. So it's not just hard, but what franchising brings is it brings that information and data. So you know which direction to head with the business, what the next steps are. So it mitigates some of the risk, And
I think that's important, because people do think about risk these days, especially when they're investing. I think people are a little worried, like, well, if there's a recession that's going to come in 2023, how do I plan for it? And I think one of the things you're pointing to is you don't necessarily have to have that fear, because look, people are always going to invest in their homes, and then you have an aging population. So there is an opportunity right there. So don't necessarily buy into the fear, lean into it, transform it, and know that there are open doors available.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah. So since this is a legacy podcast, and I just want to share my appreciation again that you've spoken into this choice, this option, so that people know that if they've got the momentum at their back, but then all of a sudden, they've stopped, they can keep going in designing their legacy. It doesn't have to be, just one way. It's kind of like, you can have a little artistic license and open up a few new doors and meet some new people and, try some new things in your business career, in entrepreneurship. So what would you say the word legacy means to you holistically, outside of any dictionary definition?
Well, listen, when you say legacy, I have 4 teenage boys, and they're 14 to 19, and they're amazing. And that's, I think about helping my boys into their future. Okay. But the other thing that's important with my legacy, outside of making sure they're on the right path and as successful as they could be and they're fulfilled, is really these people that I work with, that I help into business and their success. I truly care about them. I really, do everything I can to get them prepared, to help them find the right franchise, to make sure they know what they're getting into or don't get into it, right? And so that's key. Is to, now my company, Smart Franchise Investing, I want it known as a great company where we truly help people, right? And people are happy to say, hey, you need to talk to Marty because he helped us into that business. That's the biggest compliment I could get, and that really creates my legacy. Is how do people feel about what I do and how I help them, and that they're successful, because this is such a very important decision. When you take another path, like when I'm working with somebody, I realize, like, hey, this is no joke. This is one of the biggest decisions they're going to make, to take a new path later in life at this point, and most of the people I work with are 50 plus. So they don't have a big runway as they used to when they were 30. So let's really try to get it right. So that's where I'm coming from in regards to legacy. But thanks. That was a good question.
Yes. Well, I would say it's service to others and nurturing their talent.
Exactly.
Yeah. What would you also say would be some of your top values or guiding principles?
Well, I like to build trust. I'm very transparent, but and trust has to be earned, right? So I do everything I can to earn trust, and I'm dealing from high integrity place. I was a business owner my whole life, so I mean I've been there. I've worked hard, and I just realized that people don't need somebody to mislead them. They need someone that is gonna help them. Now, I do everything I can to really find the right match and make sure they go into this with their eyes wide open. I had a discussion, and this is an interesting point. I had a call earlier today with a gentleman, and I said, by the way, I want you to realize something. The initial investment range that the franchise company has usually requires them to have 30 days working capital. Okay. So that investment, I want you to understand, if they say it's between 100 and 200,000, okay, your next question should be, well, how long does it take to get to break even? Okay. Let's say you assume that you're going to spend $200,000 on that business. Okay. And in month 3, you get through your working capital, but you find out that that business doesn't really turn the corner, become cash flow positive until month 9 on average. Now we have to say, well, what are those operating costs, and what else will I need to get to the point where I could start taking money out, right? So I told them, I said, I want you to understand that that initial investment isn't just that initial investment. And I feel that, maybe other people may not make that clear, that, it's great to see a lower initial investment, and franchisors want to have a little bit lower initial investment. I don't want my clients surprised. So I feel it's my duty to help them understand what they're really getting into, because some people sometimes leave out some of those things. Okay.
And those details are so important.
Right.
Because you never want to be caught flat-footed or with blindsided by a detail, and it's
or not have enough capital. How many businesses go out of business because they didn't realize the capital it would really take to get successful, right? So you have to account for that.
Well, I appreciate that you're speaking into those details. And out of curiosity, as we kind of round out this conversation, were there any positive role models that inspired you growing up in addition to your father and your grandfather, or were they kind of the main positive role models that set the example of how to live into their values and embody them?
I will say that early on in the franchise space, I sought friendship from some guys with some gray hair. Okay, now I have it, but I found some friendships, and I created the friendships intentionally because I wanted to gain their knowledge. One gentleman, Jerry Darnell, who was considered the grandfather or godfather of franchising. Great guy. He's been in the business forever. We became fast friends, and he taught me so much. And another gentleman, Bob Gappa, he owned a company called Management 2000. He was a big consultant in the industry. And again, I had these great relationships with Jerry and Bob. We became great friends, and we lost Jerry a year and a half ago. Very sad moment. Bob is, great guy, still doing well, and his lovely wife Pam. And so I've always sought to build the right relationships with people, but I always look to those mentors that really could provide me with value and insight. So it's been great. It's been a great career.
That's lovely. And also, before you go, are your teenage sons looking over at all at what's dad doing? What's he up to? I might start something one day, even if it's at that 10,000 marker of the initial investment.
Listen, it's funny. They're all entrepreneurial. It's crazy. They're throwing around ideas. Just yesterday, my son and I were working on a concept. I can't say it, because I don't want anybody to know, but it's pretty cool. He was looking at it this way, and I said, hey, we could take that instead of doing that. Let's build it into a business opportunity. I told him, not a franchise yet, but a business opportunity. And all of a sudden he was like, the light went on and he was all excited. But I said, now I want you to work out some of the details, come back to me, and then we'll talk about it. I don't want to feed him everything, but so I kind of put it on Luke, my son, Luke, my oldest. I said, you work on some of those details, then come back to me and let's discuss it. So yeah, they're all kind of got that bug, and they listen to me, yeah, they're good boys. I'm blessed.
Well, it sounds like you want them to get their own sea legs when it comes to that creativity and thinking on the spot.
Well, yeah, I think I have to. I think that's the best way I could serve them, and they're going to have to fail and they're going to have to go through it, but I'll be there, to help them, but I can't do it for them. I don't want to do it for them. I want them to do it. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And that's one of the best ways to learn. But yeah, cool. Very cool. Very
Okay.
cool. Any closing thoughts before I read my exit paragraph?
Well, listen, I appreciate, the time today. We're getting close to New Year's. Here we are getting into 2023, and, we don't know where our country is headed a little bit, right? And focus on family, focus on what you could do, and sometimes push the limit a little bit, take some risks, take some chances, but make them smart risks. Okay. I'm happy to, if anybody had some interest in franchising, you could always reach me. My website, smartfranchiseinvesting.com. But you can definitely reach out to me through that. But I wish everybody a happy new year, and I totally appreciate being on your podcast and talking about legacies.
Very nice. Thank you. And I appreciated the contribution you made and the wisdom that you bring, because after those years of experience of being in the trenches, it's like, what you're talking about. So for anyone who is listening and they're thinking in their mind, goodness gracious, I can't find something in the traditional route. What if I think outside of the box? Marty is the guy that you can chat with.
Oh,
and we'll have his contact info in the show notes.
Awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm just going to read out my exit paragraph. So in closing, I'm Angelina Carlton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I get to coach and advise. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help you define, develop, and execute your legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're listening on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, remember to rate and review. Thank you so much, Marty, for speaking into your legacy. And thank you so much, listeners, for joining us this week.